Hey everybody, I'm Gary McLean and you are watching Talent Talk. Just a reminder that if you haven't done so already, please do go to the Talent Talk YouTube channel, subscribe today. As always, your support is appreciated. Another thing that we've been trying out this year is we've actually been putting a lot of our shows this season and some of previous seasons on multiple podcast mediums such as Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, just to name a couple. So if you want a full list of where you can actually listen to these, just check out each episode description on the YouTube channel, and it'll give you the full list, and you can choose where you want to listen to it. And finally, this is a live and interactive show, so if you have any comments, questions throughout the show, feel free to throw it into the comment section, and we will make every effort to address them as the show goes on. Now, although today's guest is mostly known for his role on The X-Files as the man behind the smoky haze, he's so much more than that. His journey has taken him across Canada, the UK, and led to the opening of the William B. Davis Acting School in 1989. And his wealth of experience as a theater director, actor, teacher has also culminated into the release of his new book on acting and life, which was released on May 3rd. So let's find out more about this man behind the book, and join me in welcoming Mr. William B. Davis. Good morning, sir, or afternoon.
Good morning.
It's afternoon now.
Afternoon, whatever it is.
How you doing?
I'm doing good. Very well, thank you.
Excellent. And where are you right now? Like, where are you hanging out?
Right now, I'm in Blaine, Washington, which is just across the border from BC. I mean, I live in Vancouver, and I have a country place here, which is actually close to where I water ski. So it's near our water ski lake.
Okay, awesome. And are you doing any like actual like theater or anything at that point, right now in this kind of time frame, or you just relax?
In this kind of time frame, yes and no. We've scheduled a production of Harold Pinter's No Man's Land as a co-op, which will go up in the late November, December. But we've actually started to work on it slowly and carefully, and so we're doing Zoom rehearsals, and I'm digging into the text, and so yeah, that's an ongoing theater project that's happening at the moment.
Okay, and do you kind of have a time frame when you'd like to see it?
We know the way. Yeah, we've actually booked a theater we're going to do it in the PAL Theater in Vancouver in late November this coming year.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah. And meantime, this summer I'm expecting to shoot season 3 of Upload, where I have this lovely comic character who's a satire on the Koch brothers in the U.S.
Yes, I've actually watched the first 2 seasons, and yeah, it's great. For folks that haven't seen it yet, definitely check out Upload. As always, Mr. Davis here is amazing to watch, and I love his character actually. So yeah, and so you're starting season 3 of that, like starting to film now, or?
Not yet, but
Okay.
I'm told off the record. Well, sort of off the record, that we'll be shooting this summer, but probably starting in August.
In August, okay.
Yeah, it's been season 3 has been officially picked up just last week. I think officially announced that there would be season 3. So
yeah, it's kind of a unique show. I like the concept of it. And
yeah.
I don't know what your thoughts are on.
Yeah, no, it's fun. It manages to hit a few satirical points along the way, and yet tells a nice human story in the middle of it. So it's fun.
It does, yeah. The season 2, I did enjoy season 2, but I gotta say I was definitely more drawn in with season 1, and I think it was more because I think they were still developing the relationship between the 2 characters and things like that.
Yeah,
and then it's definitely getting a bit more action. There's more action, I guess.
Season 2 had an unexpected finish. We were supposed to shoot 10 episodes, and we ended up shooting only 7. And I think the reason we only shot 7 was to release the cast from their quarantine imprisonment in Vancouver. because they were stuck there for many weeks, and they couldn't go home because to come back to Canada they would have to quarantine at that time for 14 days.
Right.
So it was just impossible for them to leave, and some of them had young children. One was recently married, so I think in the interest of keeping the company happy, and they figured they could round the story off at season 7. I mean, I'd already learned the lines for season 8 when I found out that, or episode 8, when I discovered that they were going to end it at episode 7. But so there's lots in the pipeline for the continuing story.
Okay. No, that's interesting to know. Yeah, I wasn't aware of that at all. That's awesome. Um, and I do want to dive into your book for pretty much right away. I mean, this is kind of what it's about,
Yeah,
right? Is to
sure.
talk about your book. Which actually, you know what? I'm just going to bring up the little photo here so we can show that up. And so this is your new book, which was released last week,
Yeah.
on acting and life. And I'm kind of curious as to your motivation behind the release of this book. I guess to begin with.
I've been debating a book on acting for a long time. I've had a little icon on my computer screen called "Why," because that was really the idea behind the theory about acting. That it's all about why do you do what you do. And I've been kind of looking at that for a long time and wondering how to get into it and how to get started on it. Because I've been working on acting, whether as an actor or a director or an acting teacher, for 70 years, I think. Um, so I've I've done a lot of, and I've thought a lot about it, and somehow I've wanted a way to put it together and impart it. Similarly, I was also I've had this very strange career journey, that started in Toronto and hit really interesting places in England, and the formation of Canadian theater in Canada, and a whole lot of stuff that's really also interesting. And could I put it in one book? I didn't know until I stumbled on Stephen King's book on writing, and his book is divided in two parts. His first half is his career as a writer, what he went through, the things that happened to him as he developed as a writer. And the second half is really what he thinks he knows about writing. And I thought, aha, there's my format. So that's basically what I've done. Is the first half is this extraordinary career that had me running theater companies in England when I was 24, and ended up as a smoking man on the X Files. Who would have expected a career like that? And then trying to impart this wealth of experience that I have in the art of acting.
Yeah, you can definitely follow that format for sure. If folks, if you get a chance to read the book, which by the way, we'll get it out right away. Where can actually people purchase the book and actually get a chance to read it?
You can actually buy it at any place that sells books. I mean, you can buy it at Amazon, you can buy it wherever. You can also go to my website, williambdavis.com, and you can order it at the regular price, or you can order a signed copy at a little bit more price and get it autographed and signed over to you. That's
Awesome.
williambdavis.com. Yeah.
No, that's awesome for sure. And I did get a kick out of a lot of your anecdotes, like you said, within the first half of kind of your history of your involvement in theater and everything else. And some of the names, of course, you threw out there, like Dame Judi Dench and Laurence
Yeah.
Olivier and all these guys, Brian Cox. Um, like
Albert Smith. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
yeah, just blown away, of course, by all that talent that you've had the opportunity to work with. Um, it's got to be an interesting perspective, though, especially kind of going back in time and looking at that and thinking, where they are today and how you perceived them when you worked with them in the beginning. And I don't know, like, did you see kind of the transition in their growth as well as yours, or?
Well, it's been, the most amazing one, I suppose, is Donald Sutherland, who was such a raw talent when we first worked together at the University of Toronto, and he was awkward, and we really, many of us did not have high hopes for the development of his career, and then I subsequently worked with him a few years later in England. We did a play together, and he had turned into this kind of consummate professional, uh, really knew what he was doing, and yet still had that kind of inner spark that he had as a university student when he began, and he's been able to put that together, and that's kind of part of the essence of his career, I think. But,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
and then there's Maggie Smith, who's this great comedian, and full of tricks and little stuff that she does, and directors are always trying to get her to do less. And when we were doing Miss Julie at the National Theatre, and the director just gradually took everything away until she had no tricks to play with, and she had to be really true and present, and she was.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. And so have you seen? I'm kind of curious what your thoughts are on how people perform, especially when it comes to theater, not necessarily film, but how people's performances have developed from, say, the 70s to now, and how they actually present themselves. Again, my perception has always been, especially in the past, that there was very much over the top and very, expressive in how they present. But do you feel it's been toned down a bit and there's more of
Oh,
similar to film?
definitely. Um, Yeah, I'm not. Yeah, yes, I think so. I mean, because I think actually when we were starting in the '60s in England, we were trying to do exactly what you were saying. We were trying tone it down isn't kind of the right word, maybe, but trying to get to so that it was more truthful, more real, more sense of actually happening right now in front of you. We weren't describing an action; we were actually having an action. Um,
Right.
and that was a kind of conflict, I suppose, in the '60s, and maybe through the '70s, and then it's become just more common now, partly because of television and the requirements on an actor through television and the intimacy of television, that 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 to be true and natural, so that an audience doesn't look at you don't watch a television show to watch the acting. You do it to watch people, imaginary people in dramatic situations. But there was a time, I mean, go back to the 19th century, when that's the only reason you went to the theater was to watch an actor perform. It was like going to the opera, like watching a singer sing. Um, it's interesting. Laurence Olivier wrote his book on acting, which is called On Acting, and his book starts where mine finishes. He starts talking about the results he wants to get from his audience and how he wants to manipulate them, how he has to do this to get that reaction, and so on. Whereas mine is all about how to get to be true once you're in front of an audience.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. And even when, even currently, when I watch a show or a television series or whatever the case is, sometimes I'll see an actor who you can tell is acting. They're not necessarily in
Yes,
that moment, and it detracts
yes,
from what you're watching, right? That's not what you're
yeah,
there for.
yeah, yeah.
It's
No,
kind of
no,
an
there's
interesting,
still,
yeah,
yeah, yeah, and the camera shows it more profoundly sometimes than you would notice it actually in the theater where there's a little more distance. Um, I see it all the time. I mean, that's ever since I was beginning, I would see what I thought was true and what I thought wasn't, and that's kind of inspired me all the way through. But
yeah, for sure.
some people are fooled.
And like when you kind of started though, you started in radio, doing radio shows, right?
Combination of some theater and some radio shows. Yeah, it was before television. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was much more prevalent, of course, at that time, and then it kind of died out. I find that because I am hearing more and more radio shows starting to come back out. Are you starting to see a bit of a growth in that path, or um,
It's
in comparison
well,
to
it's
recent
something.
history, anyway?
Yeah, it's different. It's and I haven't followed it really closely. What they now call audio drama,
Yeah,
which we just called radio drama or drama, because that's uh, when we were doing it as when I was a kid, a boy in the late '40s, early '50s. I mean, it was the theater. It was what actors did. Um, the CBC in Toronto, and they did it all across Canada, but in Toronto was probably the most. And the place was a hub of shows being done every week. There'd be several drama shows a week. Actors earned good livings just doing radio drama. It was a whole world. So what's happening now? Yeah, it's coming as a kind of a niche idea,
Yeah.
the audio, um, and and then I guess it ties in with blogs and the people listening, people having headphones, going around the world with their headphones on and listening something else other than what's going on right in front of them where they happen to be. So yeah, it's got
That's
some.
fair.
It may have an interesting future. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of yeah. It's funny how everything kind of falls out of popularity and then comes back like fashion.
Mhm.
Um, then I kind of want to ask your opinion of how you feel the differences between, say, a radio show and a theater presentation. Obviously, with the theater presentation, you do have that visual to look at, but when it comes to the actual voice work um, between a radio and theater, is there a huge difference? Do you feel?
Um, radio drama, in many ways is closer to film than to stage.
Okay.
Um, and what was really interesting for me was because when I was began as a boy actor, we shot it like theater. We shot it live. So you started at the beginning, you finished at the end, and everybody went home. Whatever mistakes you made, they were out there. When I went back and produced and directed radio drama 30 years later, we did it completely differently. We did it like film, where we shot a scene here and shot a bit here, put a bit there, taped the whole thing together, added sound effects later, added music later, did a big mix at the end, just the way you'd shoot a film. Um, so I haven't quite answered your question because I'm not sure how that affects the actor, because the actor is still using their voice to be true. What's a challenge often for audio drama is because they haven't learned the lines. You're working off a page, and the challenge is to get the actors to really play together, to play off each other, and not to just be looking at your script while the other actor is talking. So you find your line. Oh, here's my line. Here's the cue. Act. Okay, go back to listening. Act. As opposed to being dynamically in the situation and it's all happening right in front of you. Um, and when I was a radio director, that's what I was trying to accomplish as best I could. And it had to do often too with placing the actor around the microphone, so that I would always have actors placed opposite each other so that they could actually engage together. But some producers had them lined up kind of side by side, so they didn't even see the other actor. And maybe that doesn't matter because maybe you get it in the ear, you don't have to actually see them. Um, but because of the nature of the production, sometimes a voice actor would make their living by doing a kind of interesting voices, and they could talk and they would sound the way they talked, and it really didn't matter. They didn't really have to listen to anybody else. They just did what they did, so it made their speech sound good. And you would see it on stage, it would be pretty dull, I think. But if you get away with it on radio, I don't know.
Right. Um, so when it comes to, um, I do want to delve a bit more into the theater because I feel theater has really changed a lot, and not necessarily in the terms of how we act, but just in how, like, it's mostly just community theater, right? Like when you started in theater, there was like government subsidies to kind of help with, like it was much more prevalent and something people wanted, where it seems like it's such a struggle now to be able to move forward with a theater project, unless, like I said, you're part of a small community theater group, or um, there seems to be a huge disconnect between, say, community theater and the major, well, in our case, the Alberta Theater Projects kind of deal, or something like that.
Well, but where's Theatre Calgary at these days? I mean, because that used to be your major theatre company, was Theatre Calgary. Are they still
um,
going?
yes, to be honest, I haven't heard much in the last couple of years. Um,
Yeah,
but as far as I know, yeah, they're still around for sure as
yeah.
well. Yeah.
Because we used to think of Calgary as being a pretty active center in terms of theater, not as much as Edmonton. Edmonton was even better. Um, but those really cold cities were much better for theater than the warmer cities like Vancouver, because what else are you going to do in the winter but go to the theater? Uh, I remember someone who was the general manager of what's the name of the theater, the big theater in Edmonton. But anyway, and then went to Toronto and to a theater company in Toronto, and said had to spend 4 times as much money to get to fill the same seat in Toronto as he did in Vancouver, in terms of promotion and publicity. So
Okay.
and Winnipeg's so I haven't. I've kind of lost touch, to be honest. I don't know where some of those companies are at now. I know Toronto's still active. There's still lots of stuff happening in Toronto. Um, um, and the pandemic, of course, has clouded the whole issue too. So,
Yeah. Exactly.
uh,
Yeah.
so once, if ever, we're really clear of the pandemic, it'll be a bit easier to see if live theater has faded. Definitely, subsidies have faded. You're quite right about that. The Arts Club in Vancouver has been able to balance that with private and corporate donations. Are now doing what subsidies used to do. So they still get this enough independent financial support in addition to their box office that they can be quite active. So,
Right.
but it's
Okay.
it's always been a challenge. I mean, even when the subsidies were there, I remember you'd submit a play to, I don't know, Vancouver Playhouse, and they'd have 6 characters. Oh, that's too many. We can't afford that. Did you have something with only 3?
Right.
It was getting pretty silly that way.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
it's yeah.
Um, Thanks to Matt Waterworth, who just kind of mentioned that Theatre Calgary is definitely very busy these days,
Oh,
and
good, good. Glad to hear that.
he also wanted to mention that it's the Citadel Theatre in Edmonton. Uh,
That's the one. Yes. Right.
yeah.
Thank you.
So thanks, Matt, for that. Um, what I find interesting about some of the stuff in your book, especially when we start to get into uh, your thoughts on what works, what doesn't, kind of deal, because there's definitely a few points I was able to relate to. Um, one thing that kind of stood out for me. I think you called it um, a dry moment. I think is how you. Just trying to remember here. Which is what I'm doing right now. Um, is you
Right.
forget everything, right? You're not
Yeah.
just forgetting your lines. You get so flustered at a point where you're
Yeah.
completely
Yeah.
blank.
There's 2 kinds of different ways things go blank on stage. I mean, one, an actor just forgets their line, but they know where they are. They know what's going on. So either they or another actor kind of improvises, and you kind of work your way back, and you get back on track. But the other thing that can happen, and it happens often because of an actor trying to anticipate. So you're coming to a troublesome area in the script, and there's a line you have trouble with. So you kind of bring it to the foreground of your brain, and you kind of try to get ready to say it, and then the kind of time comes, and you hear the cue, and then you basically your brain crashes. It's like your computer crashes. Too many messages went in at the same time, and boom, it doesn't know where it is. And as you know, you have to restart your computer to get it back. Well, you can't quite restart yourself as an actor, but you're stuck. You can completely dry. You don't know where you are. um, I'm still a defender of the tradition that was in the theater for centuries and has faded now, of having a prompter. I mean, we always used to have a prompter, and prompters could be very skillful, and they could prompt from the wing, and the audience rarely noticed that a prompt had even come. It would come clearly, and the actor would pick it up and go from it. Sometimes the audience noticed, but they also notice when you dried. They also notice, you know. there's that horrible moment. I remember being in a play not too long ago, and we were all in the dressing room, and we could hear the play through the what they call the tannoid internal speaker system, and the play's going along, and then suddenly it went silent, totally silent. And you knew the actor on stage had died. They didn't know what was going on. They had no idea what to do, how to get out of it. And if you have a prompter, you just prompt and you go on. But no, they had to struggle and fiddle and improvise and work their way out of it. It's
Yeah,
harsh. It's harsh.
it is. Well, and technically, I mean, I guess the script supervisor on a film set kind of acts like the prompter for theater.
Oh, they do. They do that absolutely. Yeah.
And so,
Because
yeah,
the other problem with not having a prompter is it creates more fear for the actor that they're not going to know their line, that they're going to be left high and dry. But if you know the prompter's there, you're more relaxed, you're more likely to remember the line. So I still think we should get the prompter back in the theater, but I don't know if I'm going to have much success with that. But
I think it makes sense to me because, like I said, right, with film, it's there. So why not have it for theater?
yeah.
But the other thing I do know is, and you've talked about improvisation in your book as well, and kind of the importance of that as well, which
Mhm.
might not necessarily help the actor at that specific moment when he has that dry moment, but it could help with whoever he may be working with
Yeah.
for them to pick up and actually help push that forward, right?
Yeah, yeah. You don't want to be locked into the words that you have quote memorized, that you can't function as this imaginary person in this imaginary situation. You want to be able to live in that situation. So yeah, no, I'm a great believer in improvisation as a ways and means for actors to really work off each other, because the actors working from one another has always been key to what I like to see in the theater.
Right. And it goes back to what you were saying about being in that moment, not waiting for that cue, but actually living
Yeah,
off that reaction and how you're actually
exactly.
interacting with that person, right?
Yeah.
Which actually, yeah, excuse me. Pardon me. Which was actually one of the other points that I noticed in your notes was the not memorizing lines. You have a
Yeah.
whole section on how to kind of deal with um, your line. I don't even want to use the term memorization, but how to.
No, exactly. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I was shocked recently. I listened to watched some videos which were for actors on how to memorize lines, and I thought, but you don't want to memorize your line. You want to know the line. You want to find out what makes you say this at this point, this way, now. And once you know that, you'll know the line. But it's not about memorizing it and then trying to make it sound good and then ultimately trying to make it real. Let's kind of go the other way. You start imagining yourself truly in this situation and then try to find out why you would want to say this now.
Yeah.
um, so the little thing I say is, when we were kids, we had a day in when we were at our summer cottage where we could do whatever we liked. It was one day in the year we could do exactly what we wanted. We looked forward to this day. It was going to be wonderful. We could do exactly what we wanted on this day, and the day would come, and we'd have a wonderful day. And as my mother always told her friends, we did exactly what we did every other day. It just felt different. It felt like we were doing exactly what we wanted to do. And that's the feeling you want to have as an actor when you go on stage or into a shot, that you're doing exactly what you want to do, not what somebody told you to do, not the way they told you to do it, not because the writer wrote it, but because that's what you want to do. And that's where you become really free and
Yeah.
bring real.
Yeah, because you had a couple other uh, comments, for example, working around time, place, weather reference. So you're actually looking at the stuff around the lines first to see what that situation is.
it's yeah, that's a kind of a process. There are things you have to know about who you are as this imaginary person, you know, but there's certain things you don't have to know. So you could start as some people teach that you do. You write a character biography, you do a whole study almost as if you were an academic, looking at the character from the outside and what their life is, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you can assemble all that information. And that's not bad, it's not wrong. It's just some of it may be a waste of time because you may not need half of that. What you need is what you need to bring life to the little black marks that you have to play, that are in you. So if you start from there and say, why do I have to do that? Then you'll ask the questions about your background, about your life, about your thinking, that's relevant to what you have to do. And you won't miss anything too, because until you really want to do it, you'll know there's still questions you have to ask. And once you
Right.
really want to do it, then you're way to go. You don't have to do any more research. Yeah.
Right. It goes right back to your comment at the beginning of the show as to why you wrote the book, is asking that question, why,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah,
Right.
and
Yeah.
I found that very interesting, and definitely some points I'm picking up on, and kind of wishing I knew, 5-10 years ago, to be honest. Um,
Yeah.
I do want to bring up Matt made another little comment here, or a question he's got is, as an actor and director, he's wondering what your thoughts are around directors giving line readings.
Um, most basically, certainly as a director, I've always avoided it as far as I possibly can. And as an actor, I've avoided it as well. So, but there can be examples where it just is a quick way to explain something that the say the there's a line unfortunately it's a line that another actor has in the play we're doing in No Man's Land, which is, what was he drinking, is the line. And the actor wants to say, what was he drinking, which doesn't have the same effect as what was he drinking. And as a director, I want to give him the line reading, what was he drinking, but I'm not the director, so I can't do that. Um, but it would be a simple way of explaining why that line works better, because it's got the harsh consonants at the end of the line, so it succeeds at interrupting the actor he's talking to, which is the point of the line. Um, so so it's not something you can never do, but it's a tool to be used very judiciously by a director.
Okay, all right. And when it comes to directing, because you've done obviously quite a bit of theater directing, but you've also done some film directing. Do you
Yeah.
see a huge difference between the two in your
Yes.
approaches?
Yes. Well, I say that some of it's similar. I mean, you whatever it is, you have to stage it, um, but it's a different process. I mean, in staging for the theater, it's kind of, you do it all ahead of time, or I don't mean you do the actual movement ahead of time, but you create the framework ahead of time. Um, in when you're filming, you might stage each shot, or each moment, or each short scene as you go. um, but once that's done, then the film director or the TV director has very much an eye on, how does this look? How is the shot working? How is the camera angles working? Which is less of an issue for the theater director, because there are no cameras. So uh, you don't have to check the camera work. You don't have to check a lot of technical work. So certainly what I find as an actor is, I find the director pays very little attention to me acting. They pay attention to what they see. Um, but as to what I'm doing as an actor, why I'm doing it as an actor, that there's no time, or they're not interested, or they don't know anything about it, in lots of cases. Sometimes they do, and sometimes they're really helpful. Um, Directors in the theater can be the opposite. They can be almost too much into your into your process. Um, yeah, it's the director in the theater is generally more involved in the whole development of the work. The work is usually bigger. The work is usually more in depth anyway than what we do in film and television. Um, so there's different feel about it. But for me, doing it, because I haven't done a lot of television directing, and when I did, I would direct the actors in a way that most film and TV directors don't. I think. I mean, and directors used to be actors seem to be pretty responsive to that. But
Right.
yeah.
Well, and having had your, you've got your all-rounded experience as being a director and producer, or director, actor, and teacher. And I've had this conversation with a few different actors when, for example, you're in a scene, and the director is giving redirection to someone, but not necessarily a lot to the one actor, and the one actor's like, well, I don't know, am I doing okay? I don't know if I'm doing it right. Like, have you had that situation where the actor who's not getting the feedback is almost being self-conscious of what, if they're doing
Yeah,
what they're supposed to?
yeah. It's and that's that's a subtlety with the directing, and especially more apparent in the theater because there's more directing of actors. And yes, when an actor is ignored or not given any notes, um, there's a couple of possibilities. One is the director thinks he's terrific, and the actors are doing exactly what they want, or they've given up. They have no hope that this actor is going to do what they want. And if you're the actor, you want to know which of those is happening.
Yeah, right.
Um,
Yeah,
so the director needs to be sensitive to that and give the actor you don't have notes for at least some reassurance that everything's going the way you want and good on you or something, just so that they stay connected. But yeah,
right.
sometimes directors just don't notice them. I know this happened with my very good friend Bob Goodwin, who directed one of my first big scenes in X Files, and he didn't say anything. He worked with me, and I sort of did what he wanted, and then he left, and the script supervisor said, "No, that was great," but he never said, "Oh, that was great," uh, until several years later. He said how great that was. And we did another episode, and he phoned me later and said, "You were fucking great," but he didn't say anything at the time. You know? Well, because I didn't know him, I didn't know if he by not saying anything that was a criticism. But once I
Right.
worked together, then I knew what it all meant. But and then there's the director that loves everything. That's wonderful. That's wonderful, and you feel great until you notice that it's usually she, uh, loves everything that everybody's doing. So you see somebody doing you think is really pretty bad, and she says, "That's wonderful." So when she says, "You're wonderful," oh, what does that mean? That's that just means thank you. You worked.
Right.
So it's a very delicate situation to be accurate in your in your judicious reaction to your cast, and yet keep everybody's spirits up and keep everybody. I mean, it must be the same with all kinds of activities, but
For sure, yeah, yeah. Like, I'm sure the day-to-day job is the same situation, right? You don't hear anything from your boss. You're like, well, am I doing okay? I don't know.
yeah,
I don't
yeah,
know. Kind of going back to the X Files, and this kind of ties into, um, like, when you did your first show of the X Files, you really didn't do anything. You didn't have lines. You were just
right,
there, kind of stoic. And there's another comment you made in your book about small roles versus larger roles, and how the smaller
yeah,
roles can be much more difficult to do.
yeah,
And I'm
yeah,
guessing that's just because there's no meat, right? You really have nothing to build off of. And I just kind of want to get
yeah.
your thought on how that played out with
Yeah,
your.
it wasn't really a problem on the pilot of X Files because you know I could do my own backstory and whatever. And as you said, I didn't have any text. But so often you get, when you're what we call a day player, and you get a day on a show, and you've got uh, 4 or 5 lines, or a little more maybe, but you're really a plot filler. Your job is to move the plot forward, and yet you want to be as true and as real as everybody else. Um, and sometimes your lines don't really allow that, but the timing doesn't really allow that. Doesn't allow you to really relax and really. When you get the larger roles, then you have more time. You have more on set time, more on screen time, more time for it to really breathe. So, in a strange way, it can be easier to play a lead than to play a small role.
Yeah, yeah, and I definitely found that myself. Because I mean, especially here locally in Calgary, there's not necessarily, especially on major production sets, there's not a ton of opportunity for you know large speaking roles. They're all one line, two line, seen on screen kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, right.
Um, so yeah, I definitely find those much more challenging than
Yeah,
the ones where
yeah,
I'm playing the lead, right? Because you can actually
yeah,
read the
yeah,
entire thing, get an idea what the whole thing's about, and create something.
yeah,
Whereas, yeah, yeah, I just always find that kind of interesting. That whole play on the mindset. On yeah, because a lot of people I think would assume, especially if they're not in the industry, that well, it's one line. How difficult can it be? you
yeah,
know,
right.
well,
Yeah,
there's so
exactly.
many more intricacies that you've got to think about, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
I always find that kind of interesting. Um, oh, where's the other thing? I was gonna go there. See, I'm having one of those moments. Um, oh, yeah, one of the other comments you had made in your book is, uh, and I'm sure this is much more prevalent in theater, is repetition and losing energy. Because of course, like you said,
Yeah.
you're doing rehearsals. The lines become more muscle memory than anything else, and you can tend to lose that energy as
Yeah,
to the
yeah,
scene. Do you have recommendations on how to fight that? I think you do mention a couple things in your book, but
yeah. First of all, I think it's how you prepare initially. Um, so just to explain what I see as the problem is, which you've said, but every time I say this line, the other actor says this line, and every time they say that, then I say this line. That happens every time you do the scene. It's always the same. Um, and as you get it memorized and you get it built in, then it can become automatic, and it
right,
literally goes to a different part of the brain when it becomes automatic. um, and then you see the actors who while they're playing that, they can count the house, they make little jokes to the other, it's terrible. um, but the first way to deal with it, I think, is how you prepare it. I mean, if you don't memorize your lines, but if you've really worked on your preparation to find out why you say what you say, so that you really want to say what you say because of what's happening. Um, what that did for me as an actor when I moved to that technique was I stopped anticipating. When I had learned my lines, I would tended to anticipate, oh, here comes this line, here comes that line. When I've learned it for why do I say what I say, I don't anticipate at all. I have no idea what's coming, or no more idea than the character does. And then when it comes, boom, it prompts the next line because that's what I've understood. So that's part of it. The other thing is, what are your expectations at any moment? And that's not in the text. Uh, what's in the text is what actually does happen. But what you want is an expectation that's different from what happens. So that when I say this, I expect you to say, wow. But when you shake your head and say, I don't think so, boom, that's a surprise. And that surprise motivates me to what I have to do next. Um, so working through expectations that are different from what actually happens in the text can help you to keep it fresh. And that's
okay,
work. You have to actually do that. The writer didn't do that for you. So
Yeah, that's all you. Yeah,
yeah,
working through
exactly.
that.
Yeah.
Did have another question from Matt here. Curious about what made you say yes to working with Calgary John Joffe on what ended up being an awesome short film called The Cost of Living.
I don't remember why I said yes, but I agree. It was a really fun short film to do. It was really, really interesting, and I really enjoyed working with John. So, um, uh, I don't have any particular answer except it was really interesting to do, and it was really, really a fun idea. So, yeah, it was good work. It was good film. Yeah.
Perfect. Um, just going through my notes. Um, oh yeah, this is something I'm definitely curious to your thoughts on. Of course, there's all these different styles of acting, Stanislav, all this. What are your thoughts on method?
How long do we have? Um, uh, well, first of all, you have to figure what do we mean by the method now? I mean, it's. Um, I mean, I think I was quite scathing about it back in 1952 or something, but because we all thought. I remember there was that production of Julius Caesar with Marlon Brando and John Gielgud, and we could hardly understand Marlon Brando, and Gielgud was meticulous. Um, so so we were a little skeptical of the method because of the the lack of attention to clarity, I suppose, or whatever. But but then you watch Brando on the waterfront, and it's fabulous. So um, no, I think the method has brought a lot of uh, useful impulse into the way we all work now. I mean, we all work in some sense connected to the method.
Yeah,
Um, what there are some pitfalls, I think, to the method. I think uh, as some have noted, I talk about in the book,
yeah.
where sometimes the pressure on revealing your emotion becomes so important, and so much what an actor does is that I can access my deep feelings, and I can have a great cry on stage or on set, but I don't do anything. I just cry. Um, and to me, that's really impressive in an acting class. It's good to see that you can do that. Um, but it often is not very interesting to the audience. They want to know what you're going to do, not what you're going to feel. You
Hmm.
know, we have all these famous scenes now where all these detective shows where the victim's family is informed of the victim's death or whatever, and then the actor has to have their big cry scene. And I remember there was one where they informed Judy Dench, and she thought for a moment and then walked away. I think I can't remember, but I mean, she did not cry. She just took action. Are we together here?
We are. Apologies for that. Apparently,
Is
someone came to my
that your
door.
dog?
It
Hmm?
is. It
Oh
is.
my!
Yes.
Ah.
That's the first time that's happened on the show. Yeah, someone just came to the door. That's all. Um, sorry, I was a bit distracted as you were talking there. I did catch
No,
some.
what? Yeah, but the point I was trying to make was we've got a little too, I think, impressed with and challenged as actors to think we have to have big emotional scenes, when in fact, in real life, that may not be what would happen anyway. When you first hear about some great tragedy, often your reaction is very contained. It's not a sudden weeping. The weeping may happen a week later. It may happen some other time. It doesn't necessarily happen at the moment the detective is standing there. And it raises the question, why do we cry at all? Um, why do people cry? We know why babies cry. They need help, whatever it is. There's something that's going wrong. Help me, feed me, whatever. Pay attention to me, whatever. They're not just expressing their feelings in some great Greek tragedy way, although it may look like it. So when adults cry, um, I mean, are they still looking for help? And if the detective's standing right in front of them, do they really want the detective to help them? So maybe they contain that feeling until they're just with their family or their intimate others, and the detective's long gone, and then they cry. But
Right.
as per the method, we have to show our feelings, so therefore we cry now. Um, so, so I think sometimes the reality gets distorted in the emphasis to show what we feel.
And I think that's a really good point, actually, because and you mentioned that a little bit in your book as well. Is that a reality moment? Like, would you do that in your everyday life? Right, like you
Exactly.
said,
Yeah.
you're going to save it when you're with family and have that cry session. You're not necessarily
Yeah.
going to do that in front of the police, right?
Right.
Um,
Right.
unless you
Yeah.
are looking for some sort of sympathy or, you know,
Right. Right.
yeah. No, I find that very interesting, and I think that's definitely something. The whole acting thing is becoming so much more about the real moments, right? More
Yeah.
so than the acting, of course. Um, but a lot, I think it's tough to get there because people always also have that perception of, well, I'm an actor, it's not me, right? So they try to remove themselves from everything and become this other person. Whereas, and I think you stated it before as well, is, well, no, you take your moments from you and put it in there,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Which I
And
think is
and
very important.
and that came from the method for me was the whole notion that you think of the character as you. I don't think of the character as he. Um, so as soon as I have a script, that's me. And now, but why am I doing this? Why do I want to do this? How does that change me? Why do I want to kill Duncan? Um, what is it that makes me want to do that? Not why do I play an evil character who kills the king, but why do I do an evil thing and kill the king? Um, it's like cigarette smoking man. Why do I want to do that? Well, for one thing, I always wanted to smoke. I've been a smoker for years and I quit because I should. And here I go. Oh, great. Love this part. I can smoke. you know, um, but I'm being a bit lighthearted. But
But I think you made
so,
actually a comment about the herbal cigarettes as well, though, right? And how
yeah,
disgusting those were.
yeah, they're pretty bad. They're pretty bad. I still like to smoke them. They smell terrible, though. I mean, I pity everybody on the whole set when I had to smoke. It was oh, smoking man's working today. Oh God. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. You know what? We're actually, much to my surprise, we're almost an hour into the show here.
All right.
Yeah, that went quite quickly. I know I have a ton more questions, and I do want to thank Matt and Tam Tam actually made a comment as well about how great you were on Upload. Um, so thank you for the folks that were kind of chiming in and the folks that were watching. Definitely appreciate it. I'm going to let Mr. Davis here enjoy the rest of his weekend, but do want to thank you for taking the time to actually sit down and chat with us. And you're a wealth of information. I appreciate that. The one other question I did want to ask is, of course, you built up your teaching school, the William B. Davis Acting School, which is now actually under. Um, oh my
It's
goodness!
part of Van Arts. It's
Thank you, Van
Van
Arts.
Arts.
The arts part was
Yeah.
escaping me. Van Arts,
Yeah.
but that must have been a proud moment because I believe that that was something you were building towards for quite some time. Is your actual acting school?
Yeah,
So kind of round that
and
off.
it was, yeah, it was a very active for me for, I don't know, 10 or 15 years, I guess, when I was actually really running that school. And then I became just really too busy as an actor, and other things kind of took me. But there still is a form of the school. It's not. I mean, we were a bigger school at the time. We had many more students and many more things. The School of Fan Arts now has a 1 year program. It's an excellent program, but it's one full-time program. They do very little in terms of part-time classes.
Perfect. Yeah, I just definitely wanted to mention the school for sure and make people aware
Yeah,
of that. And so
yeah,
once again, thank you for your time. I do appreciate it. Hope everyone enjoyed the show. We will be back next week, so check us out there. And thank you, everyone. Have a great weekend.
yeah. Great. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.